Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we look at government structures or, constitutions, it's dry, it's procedural, it's vegetables. But today,
Hmm.
today we are looking at something that reads like a piece of high-concept speculative fiction. Except it is describing a very tangible, very real geopolitical entity.
It really is.
We are turning our attention to the Constitution and the governmental structure of Waikiki. It's a massive state, physically larger than Australia.
Yeah.
We're talking about a territory covering the former Cuba, the entire Amazon basin, and southern Brazil.
A huge landmass.
Huge. The document we are analyzing today, their Constitution, defines the government with a phrase that made me stop and clean my glasses. Article 3. The form of government of Waikiki is a democratic dictatorship.
Democratic dictatorship. It stops everyone in their tracks.
It sounds like a joke, but they are dead serious about it.
Completely serious. It's the philosophical core of the entire state.
And before we get into the nitty-gritty of the articles, and we are going to get into the weeds today because the devil is absolutely in the details, we have to set the scene.
Yeah.
We have to understand what this place feels like because the stats in the overview document are, well, they're staggering.
They are numbers that economists usually only see in simulations. You're looking at a nation with a GDP per capita of nearly $200,000.
196,000 to be exact.
To put that in perspective, that is significantly higher than Luxembourg or Singapore. They boast 0% structural unemployment, 100% literacy, and a life expectancy that is pushing the boundaries of human biology, 98 years for women, 95 for men.
Which sounds like a utopia. It sounds
Yeah.
like the Garden of Eden with Wi-Fi.
Right.
But then you look at the capital, Nova Aurelia, and the description is just wild. You have skyscrapers mixed with pyramid complexes, artificial islands. It's this fusion of ancient Roman aesthetics and futuristic tech.
It's a deliberately constructed image.
But here is the mission for this deep dive. We aren't here to look at the architecture. We aren't here to browse the tourist brochures. We are here to look under the hood. I want to understand the machine that makes this place run. How does a democratic dictatorship actually function legally? Because you can't just mash those two words together and hope for the best.
Exactly. We need to strip away the shiny statistics and look at the wiring. Because when you read the Constitution of Waikiki, and we've gone through every article, you realize this isn't just a standard dictatorship with a nice PR team, nor is it a standard democracy with a strong executive. It is a highly engineered, almost mechanical hybrid system. It is designed to balance two things that usually repel each other like magnets: absolute top-down efficiency and dictatorial command against a very aggressive form of grassroots popular sovereignty.
Okay, so let's start at the very foundation, Section 1 of our outline, defining the state. The Constitution declares Waikiki to be an independent, unitary state, but it's formed from three massive provinces: Waikiki, Amazonia, and Brasilia.
Right. And historically, this is key to understanding the document. The overview notes that the state was established in 1999 on the territory of the former Cuba, then expanded to include Haiti and surrounding islands.
So it starts as an island nation.
Exactly. Then, in a massive geopolitical shift, it enters a union with Brazil in 2006. So you have these three massive provinces, but the Constitution is clear. This is a union of equals. Article 5 explicitly states that movement and trade between these provinces cannot be restricted. No customs duties. It's a seamless internal market.
Which makes sense for an economic powerhouse. You want goods flowing freely from the Amazon to the Caribbean. But let's go back to that core paradox.
The big one.
Article 3, democratic dictatorship. I need you to unpack this philosophically before we get into the mechanics. How do they justify that term in a legal document? Is it just branding?
It's more than branding. It's an attempt to operationalize a specific political philosophy. In the West, we view dictator as a pejorative. It means tyranny. It means arbitrary cruelty.
Absolutely. It's a bad word.
It's the worst word in politics. But in the Waikiki constitutional framework, they are reaching back to the original Roman definition of the term.
The Roman Republic's dictator.
Exactly. A specific office appointed in times of crisis to make swift, decisive actions for the good of the state. So in their view, the dictator is a specific office designed for long-term strategy and crisis management. The democratic part comes from the parliament and, crucially, the referendum system.
So they're splitting the difference. They're saying one person for strategy, everyone else for what? The day-to-day.
Pretty much. The logic here, and we see this in the national values section, is the belief that prosperity is efficiency. They argue that the weakness of modern democracies is gridlock.
You're not wrong there.
You have 500 people arguing in a room and nothing gets done for 10 years. So to be efficient, you need a single, powerful decision maker for the big picture, the dictator. But to be free and to ensure the people buy into the system, you need the populace to have a check on that power.
It's almost like they're trying to run a country, like a massive publicly traded corporation.
That's a great analogy.
You have the CEO, the dictator, who has unlimited tenure to ensure the company survives and grows, but then you have the shareholders, the citizens, who can vote on the bylaws.
That is a very apt analogy, and we'll see that corporate vibe pop up repeatedly, especially when we talk about taxes or the lack thereof later on.
Okay.
But there is also a cultural layer here that's quite unique and, frankly, a bit confusing at first glance. Article 7 of the Constitution states that the official language is English and that the modern culture is rooted in Anglo-Saxon culture.
Which is odd, given the geography. We are talking about the Caribbean and South America. Historically, that's Spanish, Portuguese, French, indigenous languages. Why Anglo-Saxon?
It seems to be a choice aligned with that efficiency value. English as the global language of business, of finance, but then they pivot explicitly to ancient history. Article 3 of the state symbols section mentions that the pyramids in their coat of arms show respect for ancient monuments.
Look at me.
And the national values section says the country is proud of the heritage of the Roman Empire.
Hold on. So you have English-speaking, Anglo-Saxon values, Roman Empire heritage, located in the Amazon rainforest and the Caribbean islands. It's a melting pot, but it feels engineered.
It is absolutely engineered. It's a constructed identity. The symbols reinforce this. The flag has elephants for peace, which aren't native to the Amazon.
Look at all.
Palm trees for harmony, and pyramids for the alliance of the provinces. It's iconography that screams imperial stability. They are trying to signal that they are the heirs to the great empires of the past, transplanting that legacy into the new world.
Okay, let's get into the mechanics of power. The executive branch. This is where the democratic dictatorship stops being a philosophy and starts being a flowchart. In the U.S., we have the president. In the U.K., a prime minister and a monarch.
Right.
Waikiki has what looks like a three-headed executive, a king, a dictator, and a president.
The executive triad.
Who's actually in charge here?
Let's break them down because they have very distinct lanes, and understanding the friction between them is key.
Well,
First, you have the king. Legally, the king is the head of state. However, his role is symbolic. Article 6 of the state symbol says his person is sacred and inviolable, and he symbolizes the unity of the nation.
sacred and inviolable, so you can't criticize him.
Legally, it's very tricky. He also has the power of pardon, which is a classic monarchical power, the ability to show mercy when the law is too harsh.
But he's not setting interest rates. He's not deploying troops.
No. He is the vibe. He represents the continuity of the state. He's the face on the coin. And a key point here, the royal family is not politically accountable. They are above the fray. They don't qualify as public figures in the legal sense, which means you probably can't sue them for slander, and they don't answer to Parliament.
Okay, so the king is the symbol, the dictator.
This is where the real power resides. The dictator is the heavy hitter of the executive branch. And here is the first major deviation from democracy as we know it. The dictator is appointed by Parliament for an unlimited term.
Wait, pause. Unlimited. So once you're in for life.
Effectively, yes, unless you are removed, which is possible, but it requires a complex new appointment process. You don't just vote him out in 5 years. The royal line and the dictatorial line are currently the same family, even if the offices are legally distinct.
That sounds like a monarchy with extra steps. What can the dictator actually do?
His powers are immense. He is the strategist. First, he appoints the Senate. The entire upper house of Parliament. We will get to the legislature in a minute, but just keep that in mind. The dictator freely decides the composition of one half of the Parliament.
Freely. Just picks his guys.
Picks his guys. He also appoints the chancellor, the governor of the National Bank, and the chief of the general staff.
So he controls the government's administration, the money supply, and the military.
Correct. The three pillars of state power. He also has veto power over legislation passed by Parliament. And interestingly, Article 4 of dictatorial rights allows him to issue decrees on monetary limits or issues not regulated by law.
So if there's a legal gray area,
basically, if there's a gap in the law, the dictator fills it with a decree.
he controls the money, the military, half the Parliament, and he has no term limits. Why would anyone agree to this?
Because of the third head of the executive, the president, or as I like to call him, The manager.
The manager.
Yes. The Constitution positions the dictator as the guardian of the state's strategy. He isn't supposed to be bogged down in pothole repairs, school curriculums, or garbage collection.
That's below his pay grade.
Exactly. That is for the president. The president leads the government, which in Waikiki terms means the bureaucracy and administration. And here's the democratic check. Unlike the dictator, the president is elected by Congress, the people's representative, and he serves a 5-year term.
Okay, so the president is the one who can get fired if the trash doesn't get picked up.
Exactly. The government is responsible to Congress. Article 6 of the government section says the government can be dismissed via a motion of no confidence with a 2/3 vote. So the president is on a tight leash. The dictator is not.
It's a fascinating separation of duties. The president implements laws, manages the budget, ensures public order. The cabinet ministers report to him, ministers of war, culture, finance.
Right.
But the dictator is hovering above all of it, setting the long-term direction.
And appointing the key strategic roles. For instance, look at the military. The Minister of War is in the president's cabinet. He handles procurement, salaries, logistics, day-to-day stuff. But the dictator appoints the chief of general staff. So the president manages the army's logistics, but the dictator commands the army's movement.
That is a recipe for conflict, surely. What if the president says, we can't afford this war, and the dictator says, attack anyway?
That's where the priority laws come in, which we'll see in the legislative section. But generally, the system assumes the dictator has the final say on strategy, and the president has to figure out how to pay for it. It balances the will of the state, which is the dictator, against the will of the people, which is the president and the Congress.
Okay, let's move to where these laws actually get made. Section 3, the legislative branch. We have a bicameral parliament, Congress, and the Senate. But based on what you just said about the dictator appointing the Senate, these two houses must be wildly different.
They are night and day. Think of Congress as the House of the People. It has 100 seats. Members are directly elected by citizens every 5 years using a proportional representation system.
So it reflects the popular will.
Precisely. If you want to know what the public mood is, what people are angry about on Twitter or at the dinner table, you look at Congress.
And the Senate.
The Senate is the House of the state. It has 100 votes equal to Congress. But every single member is appointed by the dictator. He can dismiss them or appoint new ones at any time.
That seems incredibly lopsided. If the dictator appoints the Senate, and the Senate has equal voting power to the Congress, doesn't the dictator basically control the legislature? Why even have a Congress?
He controls half of it, which is a huge amount of control, but not total. And that leads to the specific conflict mechanism in the Constitution. Article 4 of the state structure section says they have an equal share. If Congress passes a law, say, free ice cream on Sundays, and the Senate blocks it, they're at an impasse.
Deadlock.
Right. To resolve it, they go to a plenary session, a joint sitting of both houses.
Or they just count the total heads. So 200 votes in total.
Yes. To pass a blocked law in a joint session, you need a majority, so 101 votes. He can't force the legislation through without some popular support. It forces him to negotiate, to find a compromise.
Okay, let's look at this hierarchy of legislation. Because the source material makes a big deal about it. It's not just a law is a law. There's a pyramid.
Right. And this pyramid determines who really runs the show. At the very top, you have the Constitution. Nothing can violate that. It is supreme.
Got it.
Below that, you have priority laws. These are the big ones. Civil rights, the budget rules, international treaties, the really fundamental stuff. To change or pass a priority law, you need more than 50% of the combined votes of Senate and Congress. So you need that 101 vote threshold in a joint session.
So for the really important stuff, you need consensus. The dictator can't just ram it through.
Correct. Below priority laws are standard laws, which just need a simple majority of one house, provided the other house doesn't block it. This is for, everyday governance.
And at the bottom.
At the bottom, you have decrees issued by the executive, like those from the dictator we mentioned earlier.
And who plays referee? Because if I'm the dictator, I might just say, my decree is now a priority law because I said so.
The Supreme Court acts as the check, and the Constitution gives them real teeth. Article 5 of the Courts section states the Supreme Court must decide on unconstitutionality within 30 days.
30 days. That's fast.
It's an incredibly expedited process. They can invalidate anything, a law, a decree, even a dictatorial decree if it conflicts with the Constitution or a higher level law.
So even the dictator has to follow the Constitution. Theoretically.
Theoretically, yes. The justices are appointed by the Senate, so yes, indirectly by the dictator, but they serve 7-year terms, and the text emphasizes their independence. They supervise the lawful operation of the government. They're the guardians of the rule book.
I want to circle back to the democratic part of this system. We've seen the dictator's power. But Section 4, elections and referendums, feels like the counterweight. Because for a place with a dictator, they seem obsessed with voting.
It's the safety valve of the system. If you bottle up public pressure with a dictator, eventually it explodes. The voting system lets the steam out.
So how did the elections work?
Let's look at the elections first. Every 5 years, online voting is allowed, which fits the high-tech profile. But the barrier to entry for political parties is incredibly high. To form a party, Article 5 of the Right to Vote section says you need 1 million signatures.
Wait, 1 million. In the U.S., to get on a ballot, you usually need a few thousand. 1 million is, well, in a country of 210 million people, that's still a massive logistical hurdle.
It is huge, and it doesn't stop there. To actually get into parliament, your party needs to win 5% of the national vote.
So there's a threshold.
A high one. The implication here is clear. They want a stable system with a few large, serious parties. They prioritize consensus over fragmentation.
But the real power of the people seems to be the referendum. This stood out to me as the nuclear option for the average citizen.
It is. This is arguably the most democratic feature of their entire constitution. Article 9 says that 500,000 voters can force a national referendum.
500,000.
Think about that. It's actually easier to force a referendum, 500K signatures, than to form a political party, 1 million signatures.
That's a bizarre incentive structure. It encourages direct action over party politics.
Exactly. Why bother forming a party that might not even get 5% of the vote when you can directly legislate with half the effort? And here is the kicker. Laws passed by referendum count as priority laws.
Hold on. So if the people pass a referendum, it sits at that second highest tier. It overrides a standard law passed by Parliament.
Yes. It overrides standard laws and sits just below the Constitution. This means the citizens can effectively bypass the Congress, the Senate, and even the dictator's legislative agenda if they mobilize.
So it's a direct check on the dictatorship aspect.
A huge one. If the dictator passes a law through his appointed Senate saying everyone must wear blue hats, the people can organize a referendum saying, no, we wear whatever we want, and the referendum wins. It becomes a priority law.
Are there limits? Can we vote to abolish the army tomorrow?
There are restrictions, and they're important ones. Article 12 says you cannot hold a referendum on the Constitution itself, the budget, war, or international treaties.
So the core functions of the state are protected.
Right. You can't vote to default on national debt, and you can't vote to surrender in the middle of a war. But on social issues, domestic policy, the people have the final say.
Let's move to Section 5, the rights, liberties, and specifically the economic deal.
This is the Waikiki special, the core of the social contract.
I'm reading Article 5 of Fundamental Rights. The salary earned by citizens through honest work may not be burdened by any tax or contribution. No income tax.
None, zero.
And no contribution. So no Social Security deduction, no Medicare tax.
You keep 100% of your gross pay. If your contract says $200,000, exactly $200,000 hits your pocket account.
Okay, play the skeptic with me here. How? How does a state that offers free healthcare, which we'll get to, and free education through university, and a pension system, survive without taxing salaries?
The answer lies in the national values and public funds sections. Waikiki is a resource-rich state. Remember, they own the Amazon basin and the oil reserves of the region.
All those natural resources.
Article 6 of National Values says natural resources are of priority national strategic importance and cannot be foreign-owned. The state effectively acts as a massive holding company.
So the government is a business.
Precisely. The state funds itself through the profits of state-owned enterprises, strategic resources, and the wealth fund. Instead of taxing your labor, they monetize the land and the resources that the state itself owns.
This changes the entire relationship between citizen and state.
Completely. In a traditional democracy, the social contract is, I pay taxes, so I demand representation. No taxation without representation.
The foundation of modern democracy.
In Waikiki, the deal is, we don't tax you. In exchange, you accept that we run the strategy, the dictator, but we give you services. You are treated less like a taxpayer and more like a shareholder receiving a dividend in the form of services.
It also mentions a very libertarian baseline for freedom, Article 8. What the law does not prohibit, no one may prevent.
Right. It's a permissive legal structure. Instead of the state granting you rights, the state assumes you have all rights unless they specifically restrict one for the public good. It's a freedom by default model.
And the welfare state is comprehensive. Article 13 of citizenship. The government ensures employment opportunities. The overview mentions 0% structural unemployment. How do they mandate that?
Likely through those state-owned enterprises. If the private sector shrinks, the state hires. It acts as the employer of last resort. Article 15 guarantees free use of the state healthcare system. Article 14 guarantees education, primary through university. They even support childbearing with allowances. It is a cradle-to-grave support system funded by the state's commercial profits.
But there is a catch. There are duties. You don't get all this for free without giving something back.
There is no free lunch, even in Waikiki.
What's the price?
Article 16 of Foundations. In a state of war, every citizen is obliged to perform national defense duties. Not just a professional army, everyone.
So if the balloon goes up, you are in the trenches. Man, woman, it doesn't matter.
Yes. And responsible conduct. Article 17 expects responsible conduct towards the community. It's vague, but it implies a social contract where you are expected to be a good citizen in exchange for this tax-free paradise. You don't get to be a drain on the system.
We should mention the right to information. Article 13 of Fundamental Rights says citizens have the right to know all legislation and budget data in searchable formats.
This is crucial. If the state is a business, this is the quarterly report to the shareholders. Transparency is constitutionally mandated. They want you to see where the money is going. Even if it isn't your tax money, it builds trust.
Let's talk about what happens when you break the rules. Section 6, the justice system, because this gets intense.
It's a 4-level system: county, regional, provincial, supreme. But there are some really interesting specific provisions here. First, Article 6 of Justice. Human life is sacred. The death penalty may not be applied.
So no capital punishment, no matter what, even for treason.
The Constitution is absolute on this. May not be applied. But before you think they are soft on crime, look at Article 8.
I'm looking at it now.
In case of imprisonment, the convicted person is obliged to reimburse the full cost of their detention to the state.
Wait, so you go to jail and they send you a bill?
Effectively, yes. You pay for your own room and board, for the guards, the food, the electricity.
That is wild. So you lose your freedom and you come out with a massive debt.
It fits with that hyper-efficiency mentality. The state refuses to subsidize criminals. Why should the profits from the Amazon pay to house a bank robber? The logic is brutal but consistent. You broke the social contract, you pay the freight.
That creates a massive disincentive to get caught. What about the judges?
The Constitution tries very hard to insulate them. Article 7 says the judiciary is independent. Judges cannot be removed by the government. Their salaries cannot be reduced during their term.
So they have some protection.
Once they are in, they're supposed to be subordinate only to the law.
Let's zoom into the local level. Section 7. Because for a centralized dictatorship, they seem to give a lot of power to the local mayors. But again, there's a financial twist.
They do, but with one massive restriction. Local governments cannot levy taxes and cannot take out loans.
So a mayor can't raise property taxes to build a new park. He can't issue a municipal bond.
No. Article 15 of local government is explicit. No local taxes. No local debt. They receive a share of the central budget based on population. That's their only source of funding.
So it's a top-down funding model. The mayor is basically an allowance kid waiting for dad, the dictator, to send the check.
Yes. VOT, the spending is decided bottom up. Article 7 says the local community decides on the structure of a local government and even the salaries of the members via referendum.
They vote on the mayor's salary.
Yes. And Article 3 allows local governments to create decrees via local referendum. So the central government writes the check, but the local neighborhood votes on how to cash it.
That's fascinating.
Exactly. It prevents local corruption or mismanagement of debt because they can't take on debt, but allows for local autonomy on lifestyle and community rules. If a town wants to spend 100% of its budget on giant statues of cats and the people vote for it via referendum, they can. They just can't ask for more money once it's gone.
That is actually a very clever check on local power. It forces fiscal discipline. You can't spend money you don't have.
It forces responsibility directly onto the local voters.
Finally, we have to look at the in case of emergency break glass scenarios. Section 8.
State of war and state of danger.
State of war seems straightforward. Attacked from outside.
Right. Congress and the dictator declare it together. Elections are postponed. Property rights can be restricted with compensation later. That's standard for most nations during a major war.
But the state of danger feels a bit more slippery.
Article 4 of Special Legal Order defines it as natural disasters or other series of events endangering masses. It requires a 2/3 vote in Congress. But
There's a but.
if Congress is blocked or cannot meet, the dictator can declare it unilaterally.
And what happens then? What powers does that unlock?
Decree governance. The government can suspend laws temporarily, they can deviate from statutory provisions. It's essentially martial law light. But there are safeguards. Article 11 is crucial. The application of the Constitution may not be suspended, and the operation of the Supreme Court may not be restricted.
That's the firewall.
That's the firewall. Even in a state of danger, the dictator cannot tear up the Constitution, and the Supreme Court can still strike down his actions if they violate it. And Article 7 says the special order must be terminated immediately when the danger passes. It's not meant to be permanent.
So we've unpacked the Constitution. We have a king who waves, a dictator who strategizes, a president who manages, and a citizenry that pays no taxes but holds the veto power of the referendum.
It is a system that challenges a lot of our Western assumptions. We tend to think that freedom and dictatorship are binary opposites. You have one or the other.
Right. They're mutually exclusive.
Waikiki is arguing that a dictator can secure freedom by handling the macro security and economy efficiently, leaving the citizen free from taxes and free to live their private lives with a libertarian baseline. It's a trade-off. You give up the right to choose the head of state directly for incredible economic security, high quality of life, and the removal of the tax burden. For many people, looking at those life expectancy and literacy stats, that is a trade they would take in a heartbeat.
And for others, the idea of an unelected leader appointing half the parliament is a deal breaker, no matter how good the services are.
Precisely. And that is what makes studying the Waikiki model so fascinating. It forces us to ask what we actually value in governance. Is it the process of voting or the result of prosperity?
That brings us to our final thought for the deep dive. We mentioned earlier that citizens don't pay taxes because the state funds itself through its own companies and resources.
Right. The state doesn't need your paycheck. It's independently wealthy.
Which sounds great until you think about the implications. If this state doesn't need your money, does it need you? I mean, in a traditional democracy, the government needs a happy, wealthy population so they can tax them. The government, in a way, works for us because we pay their salary.
Our money is their leverage over us, but it's also our leverage over them.
Exactly. In Waikiki, the wealth comes from the ground and the assets. The state is self-sufficient.
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question. If you aren't the revenue source, you might just be a cost center. And usually, businesses try to minimize costs.
So are the people of Waikiki actually citizens in the traditional sense who own the country? Or are they just lucky customers living in a massive benevolent corporation named Waikiki?
It changes the dynamic entirely. You are a beneficiary, not a patron. And beneficiaries can be cut off.
Something to think about the next time you look at your pay stub and see those taxes come out. Maybe that tax is the price of your power. Thanks for listening to this deep dive into the Constitution of Waikiki. We'll see you next time.